Welcome back to another episode within my build world, which today we are changing things up a little bit. As you can see, we are kicking straight into a time lapse, and not just a regular standard 24-second time lapse. No, this whole video revolves around this 17-ish minute time lapse. And that is because this project revolves around one big build that I didn't think would work well as a standard. Introduce the build, watch a short time lapse, talk about the build, that kind of format video. Today's project is all about creating the custom terraformed mountain that is surrounding my Doom mega base, which is the part of a mega base that I believe makes that sort of project truly mega. But we'll talk about that in a bit. What we are currently seeing right now, this is live commentary, is me setting the initial scaffolding for the mountainous terrain, which, if you are ever curious on how such a big, daunting terraform project like this is done, pretty much this is how I like to start, because it breaks it up into parts. Instead of one big blob of work to do, I have little segments to complete at a time, and it also gives me a really good idea of how things are looking to come together, without having to spend resources or waste time on something I might not be super loving. You'll see me often in the time-lapse stop for a few seconds, and that's not me doing nothing. It's me taking free cam to look around, see if the shape is in a spot I like, any adjustments I need to make, stuff like that. Taking a step back to look is always going to be super valuable when building anything. You never really want to commit to anything that you could have reconsidered an hour ago. This video style is cool though. Not my original idea, but the concept of simply commentating over a time lapse like this is the type of video I enjoyed a good long while ago on YouTube. I think it works very well for being able to put out a good meaty video over what might be a monotonous build like this one is. And I can relax and talk about my build processes, or even get very distracted and talk about whatever in the time I have within the time lapse. Which at the time of recording, it's been about a week since Doom the Dark Ages came out, and I'm currently playing through that, and listen, I've got some thoughts about that game, which are already good. And since I've got you trapped listening, you will probably be hearing about it. But that will be later when there's a ton of dead space after I've said everything I want to say about this build. You are in for a 17-minute ride. But anyways, now that most of my scaffolding is in place, at this point I actually took a detour to collect all the materials I needed, which was about 2 shulkers worth of everything you will see in a minute. And I did this recording for the moss farm because it's the only thing I needed to build a whole new farm for that I couldn't really collect naturally. Simple industrial design stolen from Ilmango to get way more moss, pale moss, and bone meal than I need, placed in my industrial district with a build around it coming soon. Okay, back to the mountains. Here right away you see me taking advantage of the scaffolding I set up because to start the actual real deal terraining, I'm starting with a little slice of the work I need to do, which establishes the typical shapes I will be using, how the actual mountain itself looks, and pretty much what you are seeing now is what's going to be applied to the rest of the terrain. Same color palette, about the same mix of gradient going up, but it's cool, it's very unnatural, and is using some odd blocks that you probably would not expect to make an appearance on a big terrain. But for the distance you'll be viewing, it's less about what the block and its texture is, rather just the color palette. For example, pale moss might be a weird texture for rocky terrain, but it has that very subtle greenish hue that connects to the greenish hue of tuff, while being more gray for that smooth transition to eventually straight up stone. For that gradient, I started with warped nelium, I think it's what it's called, into soul soil, brown terracotta, then netherrack, and interestingly, mangrove planks to sort of blend the red into the grays, starting with the tuff, then the pale moss into cobblestone, and stone at the peaks with andesite at the point. A lot of blocks, a lot of risky color variation and changes, but I think, as you can see with a full completed segment, it looks pretty good. It might look especially weird now since it's a single bit, but when we reach the end and it's mostly put together, I think you will like it. But at this point, it's a lot of continuing on the same thing, me building big chunks of the terrain that needed to be done, which is why I'm doing this commentary style video, because this terrain work at the end of the day isn't particularly exciting. It's a great build for thumbnails and Reddit posts, I guess, but a full video about some mountains, like in my standard video style, like what do I say? Look at these mountains. Pretty cool, right? Please subscribe. But no, for real, I really like what a little commentary like this adds to my channel. And more importantly, adds to what I am willing to work on. I've been wanting to start this part of my mega base for quite a while now, but on top of it being a big daunting thing to tackle, I knew I didn't want to commit to something that might not make a video, especially one of this commitment. I know last video I mentioned that it takes like 8 to 12-ish hours to put a build together for a video, but that's between planning, rough designing, material gathering, inside the world planning, and then finally actually building. And the actual building part I can usually knock out in about an hour or two. This build, however, is about 6.5 hours straight of building. The time lapse is sped up about 25 times. Not done in one day, of course, spread across a few weeks now, but it's a lot of straight building of the same style, and honestly, you'll see at the end I only really got about a quarter of what I need to complete the terrain done. But regardless, I don't plan on using this video style a ton. Every once in a while maybe, but especially if this video does alright, it's nice to have as an option because I have a few build ideas that might not work well with my standard format or is a long build process like this. We'll see though. So far so good. This is tough though. It's like a radio show. Big thing about hosting a radio show is not leaving dead air. I don't have room to leave silence. I gotta keep commentating because that wasn't very fun, was it? And I can't just cut out me sitting here thinking of what to say or whatever. I just gotta keep the conversation up for like 17 minutes. It's fun though. But the little bit I am doing here was a little tricky because I couldn't quite just wing it, build whatever I felt like the rest of the terrain work. I had to properly integrate into existing terrain I did months ago, as well as some existing structure, which you'll see in a second required a lot of extra scaffolding to get together properly, but I think I did a pretty good job properly integrating everything together naturally. Eventually though, I want to go back to the old terrain and not completely redo them. I just want to go through and recolor everything to match the new terrain I designed. At the least, the color looks a lot better than giant blobs of tuff, I will say. You know, I first thought of and brought up the idea a couple videos ago of a video like this, but originally I was like, hey, it would be cool if I held a small commentary like now, just over live gameplay of me building. But there's a good reason why I haven't really done any live gameplay commentary. And that is because when I play video games like Minecraft, or I'm spending a ton of time building like now, let's say I look a little something like this. I'm just not super interested in doing live gameplay stuff. We'll see, something might change eventually. Let's talk a bit about inspiration and design for these mountains. Of course, this whole base is designed around the concepts, art design, visuals, all that stuff from the modern Doom games. Specifically, Doom Eternal, more specifically, the Necrovol level in Doom Eternal, which is a key location in this version of Hell. So when designing my base around that concept, of course, placing it over standard grass hills like you see under the terrain I'm building, is not going to work. I kind of liked what I had going with the tough mountains, but that wasn't super sustainable, and making everything gray would be pretty sad when the citadel itself is primarily gray colors anyways. So I wanted a bit more of a hellish, nightmarish mountain terrain with some spiky peaks surrounding it all. Picking the colors to accomplish that was a little tricky. I didn't want to exactly copy the terrain colors from the Nether, even though it's very applicable. Fun fact, the Nether biome in F3 used to just be hell. I don't know when they changed it, probably on the 1.16 Nether update. But anyways, I like the use of the warped Nelium first, simply because it is one of very few carpeting blocks like grass on dirt, and I liked how its greenish bluish color works as a base. But then I wanted a very red bottom segment, which brought me to this kind of crazy gradient of browns and reds. But the one I think was the best choice and stands out the most is actually the mangrove planks. Very risky addition, but since, like I said, it's seen from very far away, for the most part, it really doesn't matter that it has the plank's texture. Just the color matters, and it has that bloody hue that I don't think any other blocks have. Netherrack, for example, is a bit too dark, and brown, for example. Makes for a good transition from brown to red, though. It definitely helps set the terrain as like an evil, unfriendly, undesirable location to be in, but that brings me to the gray stone colored tips of the mountains. First of all, I like that it distinguishes itself from standard nether terrain, changes up the colors, makes it all more interesting to look at. Second of all, this is a very specific decision. When viewed from outside, especially from far away, I want to do some visual tricks. Here we go with some perspective visual tricks again. I want to do some visual tricks to make the mountain range seem a lot more natural, realistic. Grays with maybe even some snowy peaks from the outside view. Essentially, from the city perspective, I don't want to have red evil mountains in the backdrop. Something like gray spiky mountains is a lot more preferable, and that's going to require a lot more terraforming that I'm not going to be getting to for a while to hide the red mountains from the outside. But a good start is having these gray stony peaks sticking out, which look evil from one side and nice mountainous terrain from the other. Pretty much all of my references that I have used from Doom Eternal to make this base have their mountains as standard gray ranges anyway, so it works out either way, honestly. Here's where I decide to change it up a little bit, just a tiny bit. Instead of how everything else is, kind of blocks going up in a pitch, because that would be a bit too unnatural and unrealistic to have the complete same style of terrain all around. On top of it being pretty boring too, I decided to change it up a little bit and added a little bit of a cliff. I made a bit of a scaffold lip to work around, and it's a small addition. You'll see as I slowly figure out how to do it, but it's a simple change to make the whole mountain range a little more interesting to look at by including simply small points of interest. Something I've really got to do more across the whole terrain. Like you saw earlier, I did the little tunnel, and stuff like that makes it more fun to look at. And a cliff like this, which also brought back the warped Nelium, is a fun shake-up, I think. I believe next we go back to the peak I started with, to essentially be the first and only one this video that I actually completed all around, which is pretty funny. Yeah, only one of these peaks out of all that I built here was actually completed, which honestly says a lot about the kind of project I started here. 6 hours for that. But at this point, it's just more and more blocks being filled in, and I kind of want to talk about Doom the Dark Ages for a couple minutes before I wrap up, because that's really what's on my mind, and that's kind of the point of this video, is to talk about what's on my mind. I really don't play a lot of video games that I can sit down and sink my teeth into a lot anymore. Not like a game like Minecraft or the latest shooty live service games that I don't even pay attention to when I play. Huh? I don't know if there's less games out there or if I'm just losing interest in playing giant games. God of War Ragnarok and Spider-Man 2 are the only ones that come to mind for big games like that I've been interested in and played in the last few years. Doom the Dark Ages, though, has been a great sit down and actually play kind of game. I was definitely worried about it being a follow-up to one of my all-time favorite games, Doom Eternal. And if you don't know, even though The Dark Ages is a follow-up to Eternal, it has an almost completely different playstyle. Doom Eternal is very fast, very jumpy. Quick switching weapons and full control over movement is key to success. But The Dark Ages puts you in an almost complete opposite position. You have a shield to block and parry with, you're pretty slow, constant weapon switching is very risky because of how slow that is, but it flows very well and it's a lot of fun to play in its own way. If I had to score the two games, I'd give them a very similar score, Doom Eternal being a bit higher probably. But it's interesting because I wouldn't rate them because one is better than the other. It's more like how Grand Theft Auto 5 and Super Mario Galaxy are right next to each other on Metacritic's best games of all time list. Does that make sense? For Doom's case, it's two games from the same franchise, of course, but they're so different from each other, yet the gameplay feels so good for each iteration. It's hard for me to say which one is better when it's hard to compare, you know? Like choosing if GTA 5 or Mario Galaxy is better. I don't know. I'm not quite done with the game yet, but it's totally made getting a whole new computer for it worth it, not gonna lie. At this point in the build, I started to run out of resources, specifically the soul soil and warp nelium. Honestly, don't know how, but the nelium ran out first. I don't think I used all that much compared to the rest, but other than netherrack and brown terracotta, I still have about a shulker and a bit worth of supplies left over per block by the end here. But no, running out of soul soil and nelium kind of put me at a stopping point, which is fine. This was finished on the Monday, a few days before this video needs to come out. So I figured I was at a decent stopping point there anyways. All that was left that I wanted to do, which you see now, is a couple more of these background positioned peaks to make that thumbnail look a little better. That's it. That's genuinely the only reason I did these last couple peaks. But that's pretty much it for what I was able to get done in about 4 weeks. Not bad, a lot more than I honestly expected. I used the last video's year anniversary celebration as an excuse to give me more time on these mountains, but I think I did really good for my time. Of course, I wish I had more done, but for a video, I am definitely satisfied where I landed. We'll see how soon I'll do more mountains, but I'm not interested in dedicating another video to them. They'll probably be slow burner completed, small updates on them when I do Doom-based videos as I slowly complete them when I have a bit more time, but we'll see. I definitely have ideas for more uses of this video format though. Looks like that's it for the time-lapse finally. To close things out, I'm going to hop onto the server to wrap things up with some final thoughts. Well, what do you think? We'll see how this video does. I think it's fun, it's a video style I like, and it's up to me to make it a little entertaining. Like I've said, there's definitely a ton of work to be done with these mountains though, like barely half of it is done, of course, but that's a problem for me to solve later. I do really like how this is looking though, especially looking at it as a big, completed thing, ignoring incompleted points and scaffolding. Gotta say, for how much work and stress was put into this little project, I had a lot of fun. I genuinely really enjoy terraforming. If I didn't have a YouTube I was pretty dedicated to, I would totally just keep going with this, but you're probably sick of me rambling on about whatever garbage at this point in these stupid mountains, so I'm wrapping this one up. Thank you so much for watching. As always, feedback is appreciated, and I will see you all later.